Okay, so it's the evening. The sun's down a bit. We gotta take the roof off of the observatory, so to speak. Sorry for all this craziness here, but it's been over 110 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 45 Celsius, for a solid week. So we're just trying to keep things cool, but we're gonna see what we can do here. So this is how I have my telescope parked. It's a custom home position. I'm gonna go ahead and take the front off here. We're doing some planetary tonight. So we're gonna let this cool down. Now I've left the Gemini on, so I'm just gonna go ahead and park it at counterweight down position, just cause it could start up from the home position, but I'm gonna go ahead and do this. All right, so everything's cooling, getting ready for Jupiter transit this evening, maybe Mars a little bit earlier or later in the morning. Here's the complete setup. It's on a pier. It's a Skyshed pier. It's a Gemini 2 on a Losmandy G11, and we've got an Edge HD 11-inch. And then on top, instead of a finder scope, I have this AT60. It's definitely overkill, except that there's something deeply wrong with the optics, and I wasn't able to return it. So it's just kind of lives life as a little scope on top. It's connected to just a camera I had available, an ASI 1600. And then back here we have an optic focuser, the 2X power mate, an EADC unit, and the 662 MC. So we are good to go for planetary tonight. Okay, so the telescope has been cooling for a while. It's about almost 10 o'clock, and we are going to do the startup here. This is my typical startup for remote planetary imaging. I'm indoors. I have a remote client desktop to my computer outdoors there. So what I will do is, and everything's powered on, so what I'm first probably going to do is start up actually 2 copies of SharpCap 4. This is the latest version, and it's 64-bit. Not that that's important at all. And one is going to be for the camera for the 662, which is my imaging camera. And then the second copy, start that up, is going to be for essentially my wide field camera. That's the AT60, so I think it's got a focal length of around 250 millimeters. So I'm going to put this over here, and that's going to be the one that we're going to use to do the finding. Now when I connect these, it actually also connects to the Gemini telescope. And here's my controller, and you can see here I've turned on the function to keep this window on top, just so I can keep track of it. And it's parked right now, so I'm going to enable tracking. And I'm going to fire up Stellarium to help me find the targets. So essentially what I'm going to do is use Stellarium as my way to do the go-tos for the different targets. And then I'm going to use my wide field camera here, which is the AT60, to kind of find out where I am. And use that to really center in on the smaller telescope. So I need to set this up a little bit here first. I need some longer exposures, and typically what I'll do is I'll maybe increase the binning a little bit, and most importantly I want to turn on the auto stretch. So I'm going to see what's going on there. That gives me a good idea about what's happening. That's probably Polaris right there. Same thing with here. Now with the smaller camera, the 662, I think that the resolution is like 0.06 degrees, so it's very, very tiny. So what I will do is I'll turn on the binning, and I will increase where's my camera controls? Here we are. So I'll increase it up a little bit, and then I will turn off debayer for now, just because it gets a little annoying, and then I'm going to stretch it so I can see. It's probably not quite in focus, but what we're going to do is we are going to, let's see, let's move this over here. So this should show me that I'm pointing, in fact, at the North Pole. My stellarium is set up to automatically connect to the telescope when it connects. So in fact, here it is. So we're going to go back to the south. And what I like to do is pick a fairly bright star to start with. Used to be Vega or Altair, but now I think I might pick maybe, well, it's probably going to be too close to the meridian. It's going to not be on the same side that I want. So let's pick Matar here. And I'm just going to type Control 1. And that should start a slew. And it's probably mostly interesting to watch on this side. And we'll sort of put this over here. We'll watch it. So my goal here is I want to center it in both telescopes. Okay, and that's I'm sure that right here is where it is. So what I'd like to do is I like to turn on the crosshairs. Same thing for here too, which will become important later. Now, I know that my two telescopes are not perfectly aligned. So I have a little bit of a challenge here in finding this star over here on the smaller chip. And this is why it's so boosted in terms of the binning and in terms of the stretch. So in my experience, it's somewhere in this area. And it's big enough area that I want to use the centering algorithm. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little bit of searching around, and I'm going to wait until it kind of comes across this small chip. It's still the full size of the chip, but it's still a relatively small chip. And let's see if we can find it here. Well, I think that's it. So let's go ahead and center this on the small chip. So I've moved down to guide speed. And I'm just using the, I'm using the arrows here to get it close to the center. All right. Okay, this will be close enough. And then what I'm going to do is, so this is really on the, back to the other, the wide field. This is where the center of the smaller, or the imaging scope is. So I'm going to go ahead and just move my crosshair here for future reference. And then, so Gemini knows this is when I slew to targets, this in these crosshairs are where I want the center to be. I'm just going to go under function and choose sync at current location. Or sync at current coordinates. And that should hopefully put my targets here on the small chip as opposed to somewhere else. And I hope that's the right star. We'll find out here in a second. We're going to go to probably Saturn and see what we can come up with. So let's go ahead and find Saturn. There we go. And we are going to, again, slew to it. Now, normally, if I was really far off or didn't have any idea what was going on, I might use a plate solve on the larger frame just to sort of get myself into the kind of the vicinity of where it is. Okay, so there's Saturn. That's good. So that's a good sign. Now, if I did this correctly, this of course isn't Saturn, it's something else. But if I, using my GeminiTelescope.net, take Saturn here and move it down to this crosshair, I'm hoping it's going to show up on this smaller chip here. So let's see what we can do. Is this going to work? And maybe not. Maybe not. All right, so we got to look around a little bit more. I think I was off on that first one. That's okay. Wouldn't be the first time. Ah, there we go. Okay, so it's really up here more like. So let's do this again. I'm going to go back, move this down. Whoops, other way. So not too long, you know, and again, nowhere near the telescope, which is nice. So I don't have to deal with mosquitoes or anything else. Okay, we're going to get this down in here. We're going to actually turn off, well, we're going to do a bin one. And we're going to turn that off. Okay, so, and now I'm going to, again, use the sync at the current coordinates so that now it tells me, or tells Gemini rather, that this is a correct place of when we do go-tos. This is the center point of where we want this to be. And now I'm going to update this other wide field camera so that I know that this is where I'm aiming for if I slew someplace and it's slightly off. Now, I'm not model building. I'm just syncing, which is kind of it's a lazy person's version of a one-point model, basically. But if I really wanted to go through this effort and do something interesting, you know, I could build a pointing model and have it be a lot more accurate, or I could just align these two cameras a little bit better. So the center of this one, the wide field, is equal to the center of the imaging camera. But I'm just kind of putting it together really fast, and it's not a big deal, right? I mean, we can just pretty easily find these and center them without too much effort. And you can see that my polar alignment's pretty good. So this is just staying in the target. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the exposure down so we can actually see what's going on with Saturn here. And I'm going to turn on the debayer preview. And at this point, we don't really need to see our reticle. Now the color control is a little bit off, so I'm going to go ahead and turn these on and just let them sort of sort themselves out there. Still needs to be a little bit lower. There we go. And so I'm kind of close. This is the thing, blue is always a little bit low for that. And then I'm going to zoom in a bit. Let's do maybe 540 by 550. And yeah, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to get to imaging here. But this is a way where we can use kind of this wide field setup and a closer setup and do some remote imaging, or at least remote planetary in terms of finding planets and using the Gemini telescope's sync feature as a kind of a poor man's model building, or sort of model building on the fly. Okay, just a bit more on my process for planetary imaging. At this point, to try to keep things efficient and keep things speedy for both disk access and computer processing and everything else, I've reduced the frame rate on this one down to 1 every 2 seconds. I might even go up to maybe 1 every 8 seconds, because at this point it's not really doing anything. Sometimes I might even just turn off the camera, but I'm going to do Jupiter here in a second, so I'm going to use this, and I don't want to lose my reticle position and a few other things. I could turn off Stellarium, but I'm just actually going to leave that on for now. Again, my experience is that I can get the frame rates that I'm targeting without worrying about these other applications running. So now I like to use the feature tracking, which is somewhat experimental. Let me get rid of this Gemini here. Now, feature tracking allows me to use the region of interest to essentially keep it in the middle of the chip. Here is the region of interest section right here. You can see it's right in the middle. And I can click in here and use my arrow keys to get a little bit more centered. I might use a slightly smaller frame size here, maybe this. And so what I can do is use the camera region of interest, use the center of mass, in other words, the center of this target, to keep it there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just using the arrow keys to kind of just move it in the middle. I'm going to monitor, calibrate, and then guide. And what's happening now is it's doing all these corrections to keep the region of interest, or keep the Saturn target right in the middle of the region of interest. And you can see that pan and tilt's moving around as need be. So the nice thing is, as I'm doing imaging, I don't have to worry about whether it's being kept in the center of the frame. It's this sharp cap is doing that for me. So now I'm going to focus on the frame rate. My frame rate right now is only about 36 frames per second. I don't think that the size of my region of interest is actually impacting that. It doesn't seem to be any different than when I move it up or down. It changes this, but my exposure of 30 milliseconds, probably it needs to be a little bit lower. So I'm going to move it down a bit, and it looks like I've halved the exposure time, and I've doubled the frames per second up to about 53, 54. It's a pretty high gain, but I think when all is said and done, I should be okay with that. So I'm going to go ahead and capture this for 120 seconds. And let's hope this is going to turn out. Okay, so I'm just wrapping up Saturn, and I noticed, I'm going to go ahead and stop the feature tracking, because we're done recording. And I noticed something interesting about Jupiter here. So let me zoom out a little bit. This is Stellarium. I've turned on the planetary motions of the planet, so I can see kind of what the positions are going to be, and I can see Jupiter over here. If I click on it, what we can do is press the space bar and center it so that when I zoom in, it will actually show me exactly what's happening with Jupiter. I thought this was interesting. So we have Io and also the Great Red Spot happening right now. So I think that's something that's worth imaging at the moment, even though it's only 31 degrees in the sky. The transit is at 1:47 a.m. Or maybe is it? Yeah, I think it's either 1 hour from now or 1:47 a.m. I'm pretty sure. Let's take a look. Pretty sure that looks like, yeah, it's 1:47 a.m. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and press Control 1 and slew to it, and let's see how close we get. So that's off. We're gonna while it's doing that, we're gonna go back to the full screen here. And I'm going to increase my exposure quite a bit to make sure we can see it. And over here on frame rate, I'm going to turn this to maybe 2 frames per second. So there's Jupiter. Oh, sorry, I also had this zoomed in a bit, so we're going to do this to auto. Oh, look at that. So it's almost right on the chip. Well, it is on the chip. I'm just going to move it over a little bit. Whoops. Wrong way there. We'll move it over. And let's see if, in fact, we can see Io. Yep, there's Io right there. So that's really good. And again, this is nice, even though I haven't really built a model. It's nice to do a little bit of tracking here via, or I guess a little bit of fake model building by using Synchronize as kind of our 1-point model. I'm going to go ahead and turn this down a bit. Let's go down to, don't really need that. Oh, and by the way, now that it's sort of centered here, I can probably just do another sync at current coordinates. I'll turn this way down so we can actually see what's happening on Saturn here. There we go. I'm going to turn on the auto balance just to get it kind of in the realm here. There we go. Then I turn it off just so it looks pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and move this back to maybe a frame every couple seconds because we're not really using this anymore. So we are ready to image Jupiter. I'll just sort of zoom in a little bit. Yes, in fact, the Great Red Spot is there. I'm going to zoom maybe not quite this big, quite small rather. Let's get a little bit bigger. And see if we can get Io in there as well. Yeah, so there's Io right there. I think I'm going to need something even a little bit larger. Maybe 544 by 560. Does that look right? Maybe just a hair bigger. Let's do 600 by 600. Okay. So again, we're going to use the monitor, and then we're going to Oops, gotta get this over a little bit. There we go. I think I'm going to use a little bit, give a little extra room on the right there, and now we're going to guide it. And I'll do a little bit of exposure management, maybe turn down this is 182 frames, which I don't really need anything that fast. So we are going to work on the focus a little bit, work on the exposure in terms of the gamma and so forth. And sorry, not the gamma, the exposure and the gain. Gain's kind of a little bit high, so let's kind of turn this down a bit. And we turn up the exposure hair. That'll probably be pretty good. 180, well, it's still 185 frames, so there we go.